Hi, everybody. Sorry for the slight delay. Today's January 12th, 2022, and we are here for another episode of Coronavirus Conversation. I am your host, Dr. Randall Bach. I think my name is right about here, uh, and I think I spelled it correctly. It's always a challenge. I was in the hospital today and just getting some tests. It turns out I do have a brain. I don't have to visit the Wizard of Oz. I had a CAT scan to prove it. I've had some weird little symptoms. I don't want to get too far into it. But I had a minor heart procedure some months ago, and maybe something flicked off or whatever. I still have enough in my brain, I think, to deal with a lot of the issues here. You be the judge. Please tell me. I accept criticism, although it makes me very sad if it's mean criticism. So, what's new in the world of COVID? Well, I was going to say about the hospital. They always want you to, give your name and your date of birth. So it's a funny thing, when you go to vote, you don't need an ID in Massachusetts. I always take out my ID, show them the ID. They're like, no, just you don't have to do that. It's like, well, my name and address are right on there. So at the hospital, I do the same thing. Like, what's your name and date of birth? I take my wallet out, and I'm like, oh, geez, let me get my glasses. It says, Bach, B-O-C-K. Like, no, you have to do it without looking. Well, if I'm here for a CAT scan of my brain, I mean, maybe I do need to read this. Maybe, it's I wish all the best to the person who wants to steal my getting my blood drawn, or my having some test, God knows, colonoscopy or whatever. I suppose that can be done, and they probably have some errors because they pick, have the wrong people go to severe procedures, surgeries, and whatnot. It's, the surgeons actually do take magic marker. A lot of doctors, they mark the correct leg to be operated on because people do make mistakes. And amongst those mistakes is COVID. I mean, I am not a disbeliever. I think COVID is an actual illness. I think there was original SARS in 2003. That should have been it, one and done, because humans don't communicate with bats and pangolins on a regular basis. We do communicate with dogs and cats. We get toxoplasmosis from cats, I believe. I don't know if any major illnesses we get from dogs, but the bubonic plague became because we were, living with in close proximity to rats. There's Lyme disease we get from deer, and I suppose we get it from the ticks that communicate with deer. So if there are no deer around, the ticks are not going to get it, and so forth. So, there's an animal reservoir basis for many infectious diseases, and for SARS, that is original COVID, coronavirus, sudden acute respiratory syndrome, I think it called it, in 2003. You needed to have eaten or somehow, I don't know, kissed a bat. And they talk about the wet markets in parts of China where they, sell these live animals, and they're exotic and they pay more because they, think they're cures and whatnot, which brings up a whole separate story that, one of the actual major effects in reducing the number of species on the extinct or near extinct list was not, all these NGOs, National Wildlife Fund or this and that. It was actually Viagra, because when Viagra was seen to be effective, a lot of people didn't have to, go hunt for strange animals to kill them for their horns or their teeth or whatever. So the white, saber-toothed tiger managed, I suppose not saber-tooth anymore, but certain white tigers didn't get killed for their teeth or their fur. And, a lot of different animals, didn't get killed for their horns, like rhinoceros and certain whales and whatnot. And so Viagra did probably more than anything else to keep species intact. But so be it. I'm not sure why they're eating bats. I mean, there are a lot of potions and hocus pocus and so whatnot that still go on in a lot of places on Earth where people think they're getting, certain spiritual qualities by ingesting those animals. Anyway, I don't think too many people are doing it, especially after SARS-1. And absent the Wuhan Institute of Virology is keeping the thing intact, working on it and doing gain of function studies, partially supported by your tax dollars, most likely, if you're listening to this from the United States. It managed to stick around and may very well be a more severe version of the original SARS. I can't tell. It's hard to compare. We don't we didn't see that many cases of it here, but SARS-1 and SARS-2 are probably not structurally that different. And if there was some, gain of function, that is to cause more severity, that's on us. That's on the Dr. Fauci's of the world, and specifically Dr. Fauci, who's having his own comeuppance, it seems, in front of Congress these days. And he's vilified Rand Paul, but Rand Paul, to all extents and purposes, or all intents and purposes, is correct about this. And Dr. Fauci's day will come. It may need a different politicized, different political bent of administration or Congress in order to affect it. But his days are limited anyway because he's 80 years old or something like that. But he has a weird kind of egotism, and he's claimed himself, if you argue with me, you're arguing with science. This is absurd. Anyway, so what's new in the world of COVID? Well, it looks finally, despite, well, I'll get to that in a second. My day in the hospital, I was there 2 days. I was there yesterday and today for different issues. I'm healthy. Things are going pretty well, but I needed an X-ray of my knee because I did an overhand slam in tennis, and I followed through, and it's supposed to miss you. It came down right on my kneecap, and I karate chopped it with a racket at full speed, and that hurt. It's been still hurting. So I had an X-ray. I think it's negative. It's getting better. I looked at the X-ray myself. I didn't see anything, but waiting to hear. Anyway, when you're in the hospital, if you show any kind of you don't have your mask on immediately, you are, seen as a lesser version. I've, said before that pretty much all you need to know about humanity you can get from the Sneetches, Dr. Seuss, the Sneetches. One group has stars, the other group doesn't have stars. Right now, the group with stars are the people who are admonishing you and telling you what to do, and they're in charge, and they are super special, and they're right all the time. How do they know they're right? Well, because we have to be err on the side of caution. Well, we've been erring on the side of caution without airing, our faces and our habits and our loves and our lives. We need to be aired out as well, not just err on the side of caution. I think at the end of the day, that is something else called cowardice. So, I've been fighting this fight. Well, I didn't quite fight it in the hospital because, you got to do what they got to do. And I put on my friendly mask, and maybe I look better with it. But, my physician, he's a great guy. This particular doctor, I think he's very thorough, and he does more of an exam than some of the other doctors I've seen lately. I personally do probably more of an exam myself. I think there are always interesting things to see, and it helps, spend time with the patients. Most of the doctors I see actually don't spend that much time. They're spending much more time in front of the keyboard, kind of entering things, make sure all, the money is going to come in the right way. They have to, check off a lot of boxes. And so most of the doctors don't really spend that much face time with you, and it's harder with a mask. And this doctor was wearing not just the mask, but purple gloves and a shield on top, similar to the way I actually saw a couple of people play squash recently. One was an MD PhD. There's just a PhD, both in biochemical, medical type fields. And in order to play squash in a room with 25-foot ceilings, and they're not going to come near each other, they're doing all that. And they've been doubly, triply, injected, boosted up, and all that kind of stuff. And they have no symptoms, and they don't smoke, and they're relatively healthy, etc. So people are, kind of in this or not in this. And it's one of those things. I think it's hard. I actually saw some fish today. They're in the fish tank because I was in this, medical clinic, and I needed to find the laboratory. I couldn't, so I walked into a different office just to ask. And they had a beautiful fish tank, and I don't think they were tropical fish per se, but I've never seen this happen. There were maybe 30 or 40 of these fish about that big, a lot of them goldfish-like. And I walked up to, there's nobody else in the room, and I walked up, and on the left side where they weren't, they all kind of gradually came over to me to, look at me with that one eye and on the side. And then to test, I walked over to the other side. It was like a 4-foot long tank. And I walked over to the other side, and they kind of all mill over to the other side. And then I walked to the end, and I walked to the other end. And they kept doing this. As long as I didn't do anything flashy, like make a sudden movement, they were all interested in me. And if I did something, then they disappeared for the next few minutes. It was pretty interesting. But, they fish, so-called school, they fish are following each other. Do they have one mind, like a hive mind, or are they acting individually? Well, it's kind of like a distinction without a difference. In effect, they're all acting together. When one, jumps, they all jump and skitter away. And if one seems that this guy is interesting enough to come up to, safe enough, then they all kind of say, and as soon as the least bit of fright, they all disappear. I think this is, emblematic, indicative, and, analogous to what we're seeing now. So in the hospital, you'd think we're like, I don't know, the Spanish flu was a bad flu. And I can only just imagine that they didn't have the technology, they didn't have the elevators and all that kind of stuff 100 years ago. But if we were facing something like the Spanish flu without a vaccine and with a mortality rate probably at least an order or two of magnitude higher, 10 to 100 times higher in mortality than what we're seeing now, especially amongst young people, I think all this would be awesome. Yeah, great. And they probably didn't have a good sense of how that was communicated. But we don't have to do that. The data are all there. I keep hearing about the cases, so just to kind of backtrack a little bit, I wind up, kind of in this debate society, in a lot of my civic spheres. And I mentioned before, there's a religious congregation, there's an athletic club, there's like an investment crowd, and I've got a few other groups like political and whatnot. And then there's, our groups of friends, and it's, it just turns out that that I guess I'm an outlier. I mean, maybe I'm outlying. In order to be an outlier, you be the judge. I don't think I think I'm out there. I don't think I'm lying, but I'm an outlier medically, and I'm an outlier politically for most of these groups in Massachusetts. And I am not afraid to put the logical points down. They don't get refuted. I'm going to go over a little bit of that today. Some of the letters I wrote, but I do. I get a lot of kind of negative mental X-ray vibes from some people who I think are frustrated that they can't refute what I'm saying, but they know it's the right thing. And we all have to keep erring on the side of caution. This is 2 years of kids not being able to see each other in school. I spoke with a longtime friend of mine who's a courageous man, and he has young children, and he changed states of being. He changed states of location. He changed from basically a blue state, as we say, to a red state. He moved his family so they wouldn't have to undergo the type of mandates that we're seeing brought on in the Democrat-run states, wherein kids are going to be mandated to get vaccines and boosters on top of it when they don't exhibit anything really in the way of symptoms to begin with. They're not at risk. They did fine with the original ancestral COVID, every single version since then. And there's no reason to think they would necessarily do any better with a vaccine. Frankly, the natural herd immunity they've gotten already is probably 30 times more effective and far less dangerous than vaccine. And the current coronavirus vaccine is probably about 30 times more dangerous than standard year-to-year influenza vaccines, none of which usually we promote for young kids anyway. So where does that leave us? I'm going to try to move things along smoothly here, and I'm going to maybe use my magic internet to share a screen with you. I forgot to get it up earlier, so let's see. So that's up there. I'm going to remove that now. I'm going to just do that as a test. So what do we have to say? Well, getting further to the news, these are some items we're going to touch on as we go. The Biden vaccine mandates ordered from the federal level are under review and scrutiny at the Supreme Court. As of my information currently, there's no decision that's been handed down. The interesting part is to hear the wise Latina, self-described Sonia Sotomayor, who I think has a Princeton education and degree. For all you Princeton people out there, be very proud. She said there are, I think, 100,000 kids, children in the ICU. I'll look at the quote later, something in that order. I think she's, thousands of times off. And she's on the Supreme Court. So, and you're not, unless you're one of the Supreme Court justices that are secretly listening to my podcast. And good luck. So this is kind of like the level of information that comes out. And where does she get it? Well, I'm imagining she gets it from CNN or MSNBC. She's probably not reading, or else she would know better. And she shouldn't say this kind of stuff. And she's somebody judging the vaccine mandate. I do think there's some reasonable legal statute for making such mandates, but they have to be graded in terms of severity. If this were literally, again, HIV on wings, where you can hail something and get HIV, yeah, I'd probably be stuck in my basement or dig a hole in the backyard or whatever and put mosquito netting up or whatever. But this is not. This is currently, this vaccine, because there's no animal host. Getting back to what I was talking about earlier, this self-attenuates. In order to be kind of basically a common cold virus, it has to be common. It has to get from person to person, and it can't knock you over completely. See my previous crowd surfing example from last week, maybe the week before. If you're too heavy, the crowd won't carry you. You drop and crater out. That's a little bit like Ebola. And if you're lighter, the crowd will pass you around. You get to touch on more people and theoretically infect them, but they don't get knocked over. So it's in the virus's interest not to do this over time if there's no animal reservoir from which it can go. So you don't see this with, you don't see attenuation with Lyme disease or bubonic plague or whatever, because they don't need humans in order to succeed. They have an animal reservoir elsewhere. But the viruses that do, in this case, SARS-CoV-2, which needs maybe bats or pangolins, and if you know what a pangolin is, you get extra credit. Write it down in the comment section. We don't really communicate with them, so we're not going to really have this, maintain itself except from person to person. So it was going to wind up tapering and becoming more mild as it mutates away. So the other things in the news are, aside from the Supreme Court, Djokovic, I guess, got to play in Australia. They put him in, kind of the dirty person, unvaccinated, I don't know, hotel or compound they have. This guy is, the number one player on earth. And just like Aaron Rodgers, he's closer to being right than they are. These are young, healthy people. They, I assume, don't smoke and clear their mucus quickly, which I think is the real gradient of whether you're a super spreader or not. I have been hearing, a lot of people say the kids are super spreaders. This is just not true. Unless your kid's like 350-pound, obese with cystic fibrosis or something like that, can't clear mucus, your kid is not a super spreader. On one of these shows from maybe a year ago and a couple times since then, I showed the basic graph of who are the super spreaders, the ones who carry a big viral load. And it's kind of a product. You can do kind of a basic, like your BMI is your body mass index. You can kind of do a mathematical product and find out obesity and age. So the older you are, the more you're super spreader, because again, you don't clear mucus very well, and the more obese you are. And if you're both, that's even worse. And again, I think the common principle is, whether you are somebody who has a cold for a day or two, or somebody who has a cold for a week or 2 weeks. And I know people like that. A lot of my smoking, long-term smoking relatives have that problem where, they get a bronchitis. And I think it's reasonable for them to hole up and do whatever, they need to do to focus on protecting themselves, which brings me to focus protection, which was in the news recently. That's the great Barrington Declaration from, I think, MD/PhD combo from Stanford, Cambridge, and Harvard. So not podunk schools. Right from the get-go, apparently, Dr. Francis Collins and Dr. Anthony Fauci of the NIH and NIAID successfully, respectively, put out a campaign to discredit them and make them seem as if they are disinformation and whatnot, when in fact they're not. So it's weird. That's your tax dollars paying for a propaganda movement against a valid proposition, which is shield the people like the people I mentioned who can't clear mucus in nursing homes and whatnot, and protect them all you want and mask them up as much as you want, and don't do it to young kids who don't have this problem. And so my friend wouldn't have had to move states, which is a big undertaking. It's very expensive and it's an upheaval for the kids and all that kind of stuff. But, people have to do what's right for their kids. That's in the long run. That's why we're here, is to pass the baton down, pass the generation. And this father, in this case, he's telling me that what he really wants to bequeath to his kids is the ability to think rationally and bring the message out and let them to, see situations and question them. It used to be that question authority was like the highest tenet of the baby boomer generation. And now that they are the authority, no more questions, no more questioning. All right, so let's see. There are probably a few things I'm missing, but I am not perfect and I'm not going to be able to get to everything. So maybe before I start, I'll just mention I've been out and we've seen some friends, and there's a funny thing. I had a lecture here 2-3 weeks ago with Dr. Nathi Maladla from South Africa, who's an accomplished ICU anesthesiologist and physician, acute care, critical care doctor. And they, in South Africa, had the Omicron episode a month before us, at least, and had a lot of data, and they found it to be mild, easily 10 times more mild, less, fewer case fatality and illness and all that kind of stuff. And they did this essentially without vaccine. So they do some treatment, but probably people just get better. We have a joke in medicine that if you treat the flu, it takes 7 days. If you leave it alone, it takes the week. mind you, there are some good anti-influenza medicines, so that joke may have to be modified at some point. But people got better, okay, and they probably got better with or without treatment, with or without vaccine. And again, 85% of the population in South Africa at that time was unvaccinated. If you are vaccinated, you may not be doing any much better anyway. It turns out in Germany, and I'll get to this on one of the slides, they're having Omicron cases. Again, it's not a big deal because the cases don't really lead to much. There's not that much mortality, morbidity with Omicron, but the cases are higher amongst the vaccinated than the unvaccinated. About 95% of the cases in Germany are amongst the vaccinated, and 5% are unvaccinated, whereas the unvaccinated represent about 29% of the population. So almost 30% of the population is not vaccinated, and only 5% of the cases are Omicron. So that means that's a force multiplier of about 6 times less likely if you're unvaccinated to show up as an Omicron case. Now, there could be some differences on who shows up and what type of person that is. I get it, but it does not show the opposite. That is to say, it does not show that people are less likely to get Omicron with the vaccines and boosters and whatnot. And the reason for that probably is because this is no longer a pertinent vaccine. It's COVID-19. We're in 2022, and Omicron is technically 2021. So you're talking about a virus that's 2 years after the original. So why should we expect that a vaccine that's modeled after one from 2 years ago would do any better? If they want to, they should just make the, update the vaccine and put it out. Now, mind you, I don't think there's any real reason, because you don't vaccinate for the common cold, and that's what Omicron basically is. But you shouldn't tell people to go get this shot when it's a shot that's basically like 2 flu shots ago. If I were to do that in my practice, give a flu shot from 2 years ago, maybe if there was nothing else on earth to give them, fine. And I get it, but I wouldn't expect them to have much benefit. We always had a kind of a code for, at least I partially made this one up. I had a rule of 80, which I think people misinterpret with the vaccines anyway. So it's like, 80% of the time they get the flu shot for the right flu strain, because they're trying to predict in advance. And 80% of people get some benefit from it. And when they do get some benefit, it pretty much covers about 80% of your symptoms. So if you do, 0.8 times 0.8 times 0.8, you're getting around half efficacy. That is not really fully efficacious for the flu. And probably the coronavirus vaccine is on a similar basis. It has some efficacy, but it was never supposed to be the whole 9 yards. It's going to be like perfect protection against everything. So I think there's been some misconception about what the vaccine could do and would do. And now that the virus itself has drifted away, it doesn't really matter. I've compared this to the Baldwin brothers. If you had a restraining order against Alec Baldwin, you had his picture and you really knew who he was, and you were on your lookout because you don't want to get shot. And at a certain point, Alec Baldwin had killed more people in the United States than Omicron. That's fine, but there's mutation, there's difference that come along, different strains of Baldwin come along. So you get your Stephen Baldwin, you get your Daniel Baldwin, I forget the other one's name, James Baldwin or whatever it is. By the time you get your next Baldwin coming down, the guy at your front door, the policeman who's looking out for Alec, he may not be able to see, he may not be able to tell that the last Baldwin is one, and he lets him in. And it may not matter because, that guy is not Alec Baldwin. He doesn't carry a loaded gun and point at people and so forth. So you may not be at any danger anyway, but it's a misconception to think that your protection against Alec Baldwin is going to protect you against all Baldwins from now and forever, his kids and whatnot. And so this is a misconception. I think we have many misconceptions about the virus, about the vaccine. And just to get to that point, we've been with people at various parties, and one very educated man said to me that he just recently got COVID, Omicron. It wasn't very severe, and he's pretty sure that's because of the vaccine. So this is kind of a fallacy of logic called post hoc ergo propter hoc, after something, therefore because of something. So for the same cohort in South Africa, that didn't have any vaccines, they did fine. The same, people here are doing fine with vaccines. So in South Africa, they say, well, we did fine, in spite of the vaccine. Maybe we did fine because of treatment. And here we think we did fine because we had the vaccine. So I think it's just whatever your situation is culturally, in a sense, you attribute your benefit to that. But I did a poll, not official, but I did kind of informal polling of people who've had COVID recently, and it's kind of a nothing burger. And these are people in my cohort, in their 50s and 60s, whatever, reasonably active and healthy, and it's not a big deal. Most people say they had a cold. So people, I've had one younger guy say was like on a 6 or 7 out of 10. Towards 10 was the bad flu. But again, everyone's up and around. Nobody's been hospitalized and whatnot. Nonetheless, for one of my groups, my athletic club, they want to institute a full mask mandate for people who have not taken this essentially useless booster. And it kind of boggles the mind, how this all goes. There's like almost no way of proving it. Nonetheless, I've tried. I've written these long step-by-step letters. I'll show you a couple in a minute. And the response I got from a guy who's multi-credentialed, also an MD and a PhD, was that the emergency rooms are overflowing, and the National Guard has been called up, and hospitals are overcrowded and so forth. And this is exactly the same trope that was trotted out for Delta, which is worse than Omicron, but not that bad, not as bad as the original version. And again, it brought mask mandates and all this kind of stuff. And when I actually poked and prodded back at those statements, he was unable to back them up. Insofar as emergency rooms are crowded or overcrowded, it's because people are running for these tests because they're in a kind of a case test pandemic, a fever of kind of like tag. They want to make sure if they go to a party, they're not going to be the one they feel guilt and shame if they're the one to give somebody else this kind of common cold, meaningless Omicron. But they feel bad about it. So everyone's testing, and they can't find tests because we've run out, and so they run to the emergency room. That's why the ERs are overflowing for the most part. The hospitals are partially overflowing because they've fired a lot of their staff that was doing perfectly fine during the COVID emergency of early 2020 and wasn't vaccinated then and not vaccinated now. They probably had the illness, and they're firing them because they haven't gone in line. And this is a whole other issue where this getting in line or not getting in line has become the Harry Potter sorting hat for a lot of our institutions, where they are now, in a sense, have an excuse or a means by which to get rid of people with whom they disagree politically. So I think one of the real problems that we're going to have in our military, for instance, is getting rid of the stalwart types who know how to, stand up and think and read about stuff and protect their families and themselves and realize they're young and healthy. They have no need for a vaccine and or booster. And if they've had the virus itself, that's even more absurd. And those people are being axed, cut from the military, cut from institutions, and so forth. So I think we're having kind of a political purge by proxy. I'll say that 3 times fast. Political purge by proxy. Propagandized political purge by proxy, perpetrated on people protective. I can't go on. Anyway, maybe you can come up with one better than that. So this is somewhat silliness. Anyway, so let's see what I have in store for you today. This is an oldie but goodie. I'm going to just bring this up here, and I'm going to just kind of breeze through some of the internet things I have and try to cut this at 45 or 50 minutes. This is an article from the New England Journal, fully 15 months ago. And I bring this up because you should show this article to anybody who is outside with a mask. So dinner may be the most dangerous part of sports during the pandemic. Basically, the point is the NFL did genomic testing. So they did trace testing of everybody who showed up positive for COVID. And here we go. Here's the killer line here. Maybe I'll make this bigger for you. We still see no evidence of on-field transmission from football-related activities. Okay, what does that mean for you? That means that when they're doing fumble drills and they're right in each other's faces and they're, on top of each other, indoors or outdoors, they are not giving each other COVID. This is back from when it was bad and a worse version. They are getting it because they go out to parties and they, have quote unquote dinner, but they're probably doing other things after dinner, with potentially dates and whatnot that is giving them COVID. And that again, has been somewhat, again, of a distinction without a difference because they don't really get sick anyway. So all these players have been kind of booted, and teams have had ups and downs based on these crazy rules that are penalizing teams based on the fact that their players are social and going out and having dinner, as it were, and whatnot. This is a craziness. And so the leagues are not benefiting, I don't think, from this. And certainly the players are not getting any any observable difference. It's negligible. It's probably only to harm them, and they get out of shape and whatnot. So this is kind of a craziness. But we knew this early on. I don't think this study has been, it's not a full study, but I don't think this observation has been brought out. I have friends who are out on their bicycle reprimanding me for not wearing a mask over the last year or so, and wearing a mask in hot weather and so forth. So let's just go over some of the other things I pulled down. This one is corroborates the point I made earlier. At the time when the U.S. needed COVID-19 dialogue between scientists, Francis Collins and Anthony Fauci moved to shut it down. This is, shows that their emails were trying to collude for that. So this is an example here, and they're talking about gbdeclaration.org. That's the Great Barrington Declaration, and you can pause this, please, and read this. Here itself is the Great Barrington Declaration. I recommend you read it, sign it, and the point is that, again, I have my 90-year-old mother-in-law in the basement. We love her, and we want her to be safe. She had a booster, I think, today. She could have one tomorrow if she wanted to, within medical reason. I'm not foisting it on her. And she can get treatment if she wants to, and so forth. But this doesn't mean that her grandchildren or their potential for great-grandchildren should be halted on the altar of preservation of some diminishing return on a 90-year-old's life. Again, I love my 90-year-olds, but it's no reason to ruin the lives of 9-year-olds who don't get to see each other in school and so forth. This is something that you should know about. This is not "quote unquote" real yet. It hasn't been data proven, but athletes are dropping dead. This is something that's happening in FIFA, I think, which has I forget the number of members, but they are seeing 5 times the annual average of deaths, sudden death. These are sudden cardiac deaths. So here's the number here. In 2000, there were 242,000 athletes registered in the association. So by definition, these are healthy people. Again, I think mostly men, mostly young, mostly non-smokers. They're athletes. They're in top physical shape. And is this a lot or not a little? Well, I don't know, but the number is huge compared to prior years. So they've been collecting data on this, and the same membership in 2021 as there was, in 2017 and whatnot. So if you average the other years at probably about 3 to 4 deaths per year, now they're over 20. That's this is not proof, but something is different. So what happened? Why wasn't it during the COVID year of 2020? Well, it's the vaccine year of 2021. So they do kind of a P analysis here, a statistical analysis. It's highly statistically significant and only likely to happen by chance 1 in 500 times. So if you waited 500 years, you might see something like this by chance. So this is not proof, but it's something to consider. This is from Alex Berenson also. I've got 2 articles of his. Has COVID vaccine efficacy turned negative? So this gets to a point that I'm going to get to a little bit later as well. It made, I mentioned it earlier with the German data, that more people are showing up with Omicron cases who have been vaccinated versus not. This is he brings up the same points as the Germany data as happening in Denmark and Iceland. So I'm not going to be able to parse this graph for you here because I don't think it's very clear, and I think you could have done, frankly, a better job with this. But it's worth reading. Let's see. So I'm going to maybe cut out of this for a second while I get my slides ready. Let me see, put this in presentation mode and go to the top. And I'll come back to some of the other, I'll do these articles. I'll do these articles first. Just to show you two more articles here. This is Alex Berenson also. Boosters are over. The World Health Organization has waved the white flag on COVID vaccine boosters. So you may or may not know this, but if WHO doesn't want it. It's something to look at this point. I think they've probably been slightly more flexible than the CDC has. So pretty much, I think they're saying here, one line, a vaccine strategy based on this is what I've been saying forever and a half. Oh my God, the WHO, maybe they've been listening to my podcast. I said this earlier in this program, a vaccination strategy based on repeated booster doses of the original vaccine composition is unlikely to be appropriate or sustainable. So they don't say it as clearly as what I did. He goes on to say, aside from a few unlucky Israelis, no one's going to be, redosing with the original vaccine. Again, this is like your old flu shot, trying for the new one. Einstein had his definition of insanity, which is trying the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. This is what people are doing. Maybe finally they're realizing the insanity of it. This is from the Wall Street Journal. What is this, like a week ago? Omicron makes Biden's vaccine mandates obsolete. There's no evidence so far that vaccines are reducing infections from the fast-spreading variant. So the good news is it's a fast-spreading variant. It's mild. Vaccines are relevant to it. And no matter how people, try to put this on retroactively as helpful, it is not. So this is the key paragraph here. I would say these findings are now obsolete as of January 1st. Omicron represented essentially all of U.S. COVID cases. Blah, 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 blah. As the CDC put it in December 20, we don't yet know how well vaccines and medications work against it. Well, this is kind of a left-handed compliment kind of way of saying that they don't work. What else we have here? So I finally did find, this is totally separate. I finally did find a dashboard that goes into depth about COVID details. It's actually on a candidate for Congress, a Republican running in Massachusetts. So go figure. But she has one of the only things I've seen which separate the data by age group. I'm not going to have to ask where she got it, but I've been looking for data like this, which show the various age groups, mostly the elderly, when you do look at hospitalizations and whatnot, as having the problem. The young people are down here. Whereas, if you look at actual numbers, demographics, this is the majority of population. I think the median age is in a population around 34. So half your population is in with these younger age groups. And so half your population has very, very low representation in hospital during COVID. So this is by 80, 90% of the hospital census represents a small fraction of the population. So I think that's it for the slides. I'm going to maybe do just a couple of my slideshow slides and see if I can get to some questions as well. So I'm going to step out here, remove this for a second. Let's see. Let's see. Look at I'm not going to be able to answer all of these right now, but I thank you for commenting, and I hope there's a lively discussion here today. So I'm going to put this on slideshow and just go over some of the things that I've been looking at. And they're not in fabulous order. I'm going to go through them quickly because I have yet to eat dinner, and you don't want to see me when I'm hungry. So this is to the point that I was mentioning about the Germany data, and I'll let you figure this out yourself. 30% of the population is not vaccinated. I point that out up here. Yet, they're very, very low numbers. They're not 30% of the COVID cases currently. This is the same point made, I believe, from Canada. So it could be passed around. They blot out the word, whatever this word is, starts with a V, and un-V, something, vaccinated maybe. Hospital patients vaccinated outpace the unvaccinated, but it doesn't mean the shots don't work. Experts, of course, obviously. So this is your Omicron. These are the top 5 Omicron symptoms over here. And of course, they pretty much align with what we used to call the common cold. This is cold and flu medicine from NyQuil. So I guess you should stop society and make people robotically wear these disposable masks endlessly. This is trash, and there's aluminum in it, and they're supposed to throw it away. It's made I don't know, somebody's profiting by it, probably China. So I tried to bring this up to one of my groups and this is part of the letter I wrote. You can pause it. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but it's pretty much the point I just made. I was given this response that the hospitals are overflowing. And again, this is kind of a trope that they used in Delta. If you look at the tweets, somebody collects these things. It's, they get everyone to kind of like mass produce the same sentiment to kind of like propagandize and sway people. But if you look this from, I think NPR, local public radio, and there's an honest reporter there. Her name is Bebinger, I think. She compiled these, which shows that because basically there are fewer hospital beds because people have reduced their hours. They've taken a leave. She changed jobs. She doesn't mention that they've been fired because of not taking the vaccine, but that is also the case. And the National Guard one was a similar silly aspect because of people being fired. So this is a lot of the data here. I was mentioned, Sotomayor mentioned this part here. The Supreme Court justice mentioned these other items, and again, each one is false. So they should really, this is again the Democrat appointed justices. They should get their facts better. And so there's kind of another narrative that's been running along. It's like the conflation and confounding of data, wherein people are hospitalized with but not from COVID. So what else we have here? So this is Martha Bebinger, who produced that other stuff from NPR. And again, she's mentioned the ERs are overcrowded because they can't get the tests at other places. And why is that? Because we've made it kind of a testing crazy society. This is a point I believe I wrote, and you can stop and read it if you like. This is another tough slide to read, but you can pause and look at it. This is part of the letter I wrote to one of my groups about some of the draconian measures they're undertaking right now. And you've pretty much heard what I had to say. If you want to stop and read it, you can do that. This is a response I got. This is from a physician, very well respected physician, in one of my groups, civic groups, and he read these points here. Oops, sorry, and came up with this conclusion that I see this as your conclusion, either that old people or those with underlying illness would have died anyway. I just don't see it that way. You can read this over. You can tell me if anything I've said here makes it sound like this. I believe in protecting the old people, and yes, they will die at some point. The nursing home deaths, half of the COVID deaths are nursing home quality patients, and the nursing home life expectancy when you get there is about 14 months, or otherwise you wouldn't be in a nursing home. And there's a turnover of about half the nursing home population every year. And so, a certain fraction of them died from COVID, yes, but they would be dying anyway. But I don't think old people in general would have died anyway. I do think there was a blip in COVID deaths, but that's early 2020. There has not been the replication of same since then. There's been a lot of, kind of puffing up, turbocharging the data because of financial incentive or whatever political gain people have by exaggerating. And we've seen that most of the responses I got were exaggerated claims of hospital overcrowding, ER overcrowding, et cetera. This is, again, kind of long. Don't expect you to read it, but you can always stop and pause and look. This is a letter similarly I wrote. I'm trying to get them to undo their mandate for masking if you're not boosted, when boostering is kind of a pointless task, especially if you've had the illness already, and especially since Omicron is kind of a nothing burger. Just as a quick reminder, this is the COVID hospitalization rate per age group. And I'm sorry for the slide on not incorporating everything, but it's very low for everybody. And even for those people 70 and above, it's a low rate. This, I guess I already showed this from the Wall Street Journal article. This is kind of complicated. I maybe pause this if you're interested. This is, talking about the lockdowns. Do the benefits exceed the costs? So over here, the benefits from all the lockdowns we've had, and these are the costs we've incurred. And I think this is never seen in the places like the clinic I was at today, where everyone's just worried about that one germ. And they're not, seeing all the absurdity, the anger, the irritation the lack of breathing adequate oxygen on a daily basis, maybe making people irritable and so forth. This is I find this kind of a humorous meme. I'm kind of going to do these quick memes I find, and maybe some Twitter stuff. Mass formation psychosis is quickly becoming a new far-right buzzword. This literally was passing around most of the left-leaning sites, because guess what? We are having mass formation psychosis. People who wanting at this stage of the game to be masking people eternally for a cold or the equivalent when the booster doesn't work. This is craziness. And you can see here, there is some kind of like change in the narrative. So it's not just our mass formation psychosis. The reason is because we've been told all the opposite of this prior. So we've been lied to so long. The truth comes out. There was gain of function in Wuhan. We supported it. Fauci signed off on it. And to be told the opposite endlessly does make you feel, as if there's a little bit mass formation psychosis, aka propaganda. You can stop and look at these slides. This one's pretty quick. If masks work, why do this? Why do that? And if they all work, then why were there lockdowns? So he's bringing the same point here about the hospitals kind of misdiagnosing, overdiagnosing. These black ones here are from Ben Shapiro. I'll just leave them there for you to look at. The one on the right, this guy, the BBC, was criticizing Djokovic. Who is the threat to health services? I mean, you care so much about health, really, clean your own house, look to your own self. People in glass houses, et cetera, et cetera. This is, again, Ben Shapiro talking about Djokovic. You can stop it if you like. These are just a couple of memes. This shows kind of the progression that people are having, and this becomes kind of more a polemic, political thing than a virus than an actual physical one, because the physical one is not that bad anymore. Here's our political leaders. I think just as of last week, I think this was a funeral service of some type. Maybe, I'm not positive. I don't remember what it was, but this is sad. You can bet your last dollar that Mr. Biden is, quintuply, triply, whatever it is, boosted and whatnot. And everybody is, this is just not a good look for your leaders. I really think it's crazy. I don't think this, shows power. I think that you need to project power as a leader of the, greatest free world democracy, constitutional republic. And this does not do that. This is our old friend Fyodor Dostoevsky. I have to tell you that reading Crime and Punishment, it didn't quite change my life, but it's been, really an interesting ride since then. I recommend you read it. I'm impressed that people betray themselves for so little and give up freedom for so little. Please don't do that. Again, another meme. You can stop and read it. I like this one from Jenna Ellis. She's an attorney, but she's not wrong. It kind of goes back to the NyQuil slide up above. I see a lot of this stuff. This is not my photograph, but I've been seeing a lot of this lately. My physician was similarly, but he had gloves as well. And this countervailing point, if you wear your mask in public, why don't you wear one at home? So, I don't know. Figure this stuff out yourself. This is an interesting side from a doctor. And this reiterates the point about exaggeration in our hospitals. Here's a new style you might get. Just open this up every little while, every few months. You can read these. I think I'm not sure the government is the virus, because the government is us. We just have to be more attentive, and we have to take back the narrative. We have to say what we need to. The media is how it spreads. People's behavior, it's not everyone's behavior. It's whether you are able still to question authority. I do believe in the last part here. So this is an older guy, Marcus Aurelius, Roman emperor and smart guy. But you have to, be able to, keep the thing of real value to think for yourself. So I'm going to end it with that. And I hope you enjoyed what I had to say here. Let's see. Am I tired of this yet? I'm going to read some. Let's see. There's a Steve Beard here who put up a few comments. And so you can read his comments here. I don't think this one's wrong. COVID virus is tiny. I think it's actually 50 microns. The CDC is announcing N95. I think this is going to disappear. Looks like my posts are silent. I'm out. I'm sorry if I addressed it too late. I hope you have a good evening. Please share this. Pass this around. You are the message. You are the good virus, and you're going to make the world a better place by thinking and acting appropriately. And I wish you an excellent night. Thanks so much.